Ο Χάουαρντ Λίμαν ήταν ο πρώτος άνθρωπος μέσα από την βιομηχανία ο οποίος επιβεβαίωσε τις καταγγελίες των ακτιβιστών.
Howard Lyman is a former cattle rancher turned vegetarian. You hear me? Former cattle rancher turned vegetarian. We want to know why.
Οι εμφανίσεις του στην τηλεόραση προκάλεσαν σάλα.
100,000 cows per year in the United States are fine at night, dead in the morning. The majority of those cows are rounded up, ground up, fed back to other cows.
Now see, wait a minute. Let me just ask you this right now, Howard. How do you know for sure that the cows are ground up and fed back to the other cows?
Oh, I've seen it. These are USDA statistics. They're not something that we're making up. Right now, remember...
Now, doesn't that concern y'all a little bit right here, hearing that? It has just stopped me cold from eating another burger. I'm stopped, but...
You can't take 5,000 head of cattle and fatten them for market without bringing them in, putting them in a pen, changing their diet. An animal that was supposed to eat grass, we ended up, we were feeding them grain, ground up dogs, cats, roadkill, other cows, antibiotics, hormones. We go out and collect roadkill, deer, elk, possum, raccoons, scrape them up off the road, grind them up and turn them into feed. The city of Los Angeles alone, 200 tons of dogs and cats a month that are euthanized, full of chemicals that were used to kill them, that the rendering industry will freely admit is not broken down in the rendering process, are ground up, turned into feed, and fed back to other animals. As I can tell, 95% of all the cattle fed in factory feedlots in North America today are eating the remains of other animals. There was no product that we could find, if it was cheap enough, we would not use to fatten an animal as quickly as possible to get the economic gain for it so we can make money.
Quarter, 8.25, and now 50-50 running right to 8.5. 8.5 on him, right at quarter did, and now 8.50. What do you want to do to give 8.5 on him? What do you want to do last call? And I have sold it $9 a pound over here, $9 a pound it is.
Μέλη της οργάνωσης PETA βιντεοσκοπούν κάθε τόσο παράνομα και με κίνδυνο της ζωής τους τις συνθήκες που επικρατούν μέσα στις βιομηχανικές φάρμες.
At Seaboard Farms in Oklahoma, we had an undercover investigator in there for 3 months. They can cram quite a few more than 1,000 pigs into these massive barns. It's really, I mean, they do it with chickens, they do it with pigs, they're now doing it with ducks, the mother pigs, who are kept in what are called gestation crates. And for 3 years, their entire lives, these mother pigs are kept in these crates roughly the size of their bodies. They go literally insane.
Τα αγρούλια τρελαίνονται και δαγκώνουν τα κάγκελα. Τα κοτόπουλα επιτίθενται το ένα στο άλλο. Η λύση είναι απλή.
They rip the teeth out of the animals, they chop their tails off so they won't attack one another, they castrate the males.
Οργανώσεις όπως η Public Citizen προειδοποιούν ότι οι συνθήκες στις βιομηχανικές φάρμες απειλούν τη δημόσια υγεία.
There's been research recently that shows it changes the whole environment in their intestine, and different bacteria grow, including ones like E. coli and the varieties of E. coli that make people very sick. That's been studied in relation to that if they ate grass and straw, it's a much tougher environment for those bad bacteria to live in. You know, so that's one factor. When you're in a feedlot, most likely they're standing around in the north.
And then oftentimes on a lot of these farms, they're living in the feces and urine of the crop of animals who were there before them too. I mean, they will frequently not clean out these sheds for like a year or two. So you're talking about 4 sets of animals from birth to death living in the feces and urine of all of the other animals who have come before. In addition to the lameness, in addition to all of the other sicknesses and the bacterial contamination, most of the animals have respiratory problems, just like you or I would have respiratory problems and pneumonia and that sort of thing, forced to live with 1,000 other people in a room that could only fit about those 1,000 people.
We ended up spraying all of our cattle with insecticides for all of the pests that were attaching themselves to it.
All of these animals have athlete's foot. Oftentimes their feet are literally being eaten away because they continue to live in their feces and in their urine for their entire lives without any kind of veterinary treatment for these things, because it doesn't pay to treat them. They just have to be shipped to slaughter at 6 months.
And in the slaughterhouse, these lines are running faster and faster, and they're more automated. There's fewer people and more machines, so they just want to keep these going as fast as they can. And when you make a mistake in a slaughterhouse, you're talking about, you know, the hide touching the meat, which was dirty, or you're talking about if you miss a cut or you make a bad cut, you're talking about feces and pretty gross stuff that's dealing, you know, that's bringing bacteria into contact with the meat.
Free meat! When do we want it? Now! Filthy meat should go away! USDA! Filthy meat should go away! USDA! Make safer meat today!
Οι παθογόνοι οργανισμοί προκαλούν δηλητηριάσεις σε όλο τον κόσμο. Στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, 1 στους 4 ανθρώπους παθαίνει κάθε χρόνο τροφική δηλητηρίαση.
I was a victim of foodborne disease. When the ordeal was over, I had lost my spleen, my hair, a boyfriend, a normal immune system, and a semester of college.
Dirty heat has got to go! Hey! Dirty heat has got to go! Hey!
Κάθε χρόνο, περίπου 5.000 πεθαίνουν από χαλασμένο κόκκινο κρέας και κοτόπουλα. Οι ασθενέστεροι οργανισμοί είναι οι πιο ευάλωτοι.
This is my son, Kevin. A little over 1 month after this picture was taken on a family vacation, Kevin died.
Η υπεύθυνη για το θάνατο του μικρού Κέβιν ήταν μία από τις αγαπημένες τροφές των παιδιών, ένα χάμπουργκερ.
Well, the issue with hamburger is that it tends to be the cheaper meat, right? Because you're going to grind it up. You're not going to turn something that could be a really fine steak into hamburger.
Παλιότερα έφτιαχναν το χάμπουργκερ από τα υπολείμματα κρέατος, ενός μόνο ζώου. Αλλά λόγω της εξάπλωσης του fast food, οι ανάγκες σε κρέας πολλαπλασιάστηκαν. Σήμερα μαζεύουν τα υπολείμματα του κρέατος από διαφορετικά ζώα, πολλές φορές και από διαφορετικές χώρες. Έτσι, μόνο ένα μολυσμένο ζώο μπορεί να μολύνει χιλιάδες πιάτα.
That it's cheaper meat, they make it in really big batches. So meat from a lot of different animals can end up in one batch of hamburger, so that increases your odds for, you know, one unhealthy amount to be spread through a much bigger pool of meat. So hamburger is probably one of the riskier areas in terms of food safety.
I don't want another child to have to suffer what my son suffered and the grief that my husband and I walk through every single day.
Αντί να αντιμετωπίσουν τις αιτίες του προβλήματος, οι μεγάλες κτηνοτροφικές μονάδες επιλέγουν μια άλλη λύση. Περισσότερα φάρμακα. Πολλές φορές κάνουν και λουτρό στα ζώα, αλλά σε δεξαμενές με εντομοκτόνο.
I was spending over $100,000 a year buying fertilizer, insecticides, hormones, medication. You know, the 7,000 head of cattle we had, every day they ended up with an antibiotic in their ration.
Συχνά τα αντιβιωτικά δεν χορηγούνται για να καταπολεμήσουν ασθένειες, αλλά για να αυξήσουν στα γρήγορα το βάρος των ζώων.
They're not showing signs of an illness that you would treat with antibiotics, but they use what they call a subtherapeutic dose, which is a dose that's lower than what you would give for a medical reason, promotes their growth. So they're feeding antibiotics to animals across the board, to every animal in that facility, in their feed as a way to promote their growth.
Για την ανθρώπινη υγεία, η μαζική χρήση αντιβιωτικών είναι καταστροφική. Μέσω του κρέατος που καταναλώνουμε, τα αντιβιωτικά περνάνε στο ανθρώπινο σώμα. Έρευνες στην Ελλάδα και σε όλο τον κόσμο δείχνουν ότι οι παθογόνοι οργανισμοί αναπτύσσουν αντίσταση στα αντιβιωτικά, που χάνουν την αποτελεσματικότητά τους. Στη Μεγάλη Βρετανία, η οργάνωση Viva κάνει εκστρατεία εναντίον της αλόγιστης χρήσης των αντιβιωτικών στα ζώα.
My background before I had this job was as a registered nurse, and when I first started looking at this question, there are antibiotics which are administered to pigs which are identical to the antibiotics that I used to administer to my patients as a nurse for many years. Now, every time that we use those antibiotics, we're increasing the number of resistant bacteria, and it is a recognised extremely disturbing problem that antibiotic resistance, again from my experience as a nurse, there are illnesses that we used to be able to treat simply 16 or 17 years ago that are now very difficult and very expensive to treat because the antibiotics that we used to use are no longer as effective.
You get sick and you need an antibiotic.